Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a beautiful Thursday morning. I think it's probably more beautiful in my mind rather than outside. As I look out the window, it's pouring with rain. So a positive mindset, I think, is what we need whilst it's hammering with rain outside. So look, thank you for joining me today. And again, thank you if you've been with me on the previous webinars that I've been hosting. So my name is Laurent Bouvier, and I'm going to be the host with you today for the third of the TheZone Webinars. So we've had a few technical issues with Zoom. This is why it isn't a live webinar. So thankfully, my guest today has agreed that we would record it, get it up onto LinkedIn, and then you can share all of her experiences and knowledge. So before I introduce that guest speaker, just want to acknowledge the obvious, that we are still going through this crazy period, and you know, it's impacting everybody's normal. So I hope everyone on today's call is still safe and is well and adapting to the changes around them. The purpose of these webinars is to positively contribute to the community. It's about bringing care, connection and insights and supporting everybody as we go through these challenging times. And I genuinely believe that if each one of us does what we're capable of doing, then we'll look back at this moment in time and think, actually, it brought out my best characteristics, the best values of being human. And I think that's about all that we can do on an individual level. So let me introduce you to my guest speaker today, Hannah Atack, who's an HR director at Alamy. Hannah, welcome.
Hi, Laurent. Hi, everyone. Just to introduce myself, as Laurent said, I'm the HR director currently at Alamy, but I've worked in a number of HR roles in banking, retail, telecommunications, consultancy and technology, both in the corporate world and the SME startup environment. I've worked across a number of HR topics in my career, from reward to employee relations, but today as a leader I'm focused much more on the strategic area of HR, working as part of a great team and delivering an agile HR product to the business, aligned to our business strategy.
So Hannah, my ears pricked up there. You mentioned HR as a product, HR product. What do you mean by that?
So HR as a product is really about thinking, rather than thinking about HR as a service or as a process-led environment, HR as a product is thinking much more about the end user. So shaping what you're providing to your end user, involving them to understand what their needs are, and make sure that you're delivering a product that they will engage with and get the most value from. So it's thinking about always delivering something that's going to add value and absolutely resonates with your customer, and your customer being your employee base across the organization.
So I mean that feels, you know, having a bit of a consumer background myself, but that feels very much of that. There's a real strong link between your customer, as you call them, and the service that you're delivering. So it's very much more agile and very much focused on the relevancy of what you're bringing to that customer. Is that right?
Yes, whatever you're delivering has to be relevant in the moment. And I think as an HR team, you always have to be adapting and thinking in an agile way to make sure that whatever you have, whatever product you've put in place is always absolutely relevant to the situation at the time. And that means it's always under review. You might be adapting it and changing it as you go. But it's always with your end user in mind and what value you're going to add for your end user.
Mm-hmm. So that feels like quite a big shift from maybe historically the HR function has been seen more as a sort of compliance function, about how do we make sure we're compliant with our employees, to actually really adding value to the business and to the employees by being, you know, sort of current and vibrant in what they're trying to do.
Well, I think any team within any business that wants to deliver value has to think in a commercial way. And if you think about how do commercial teams add value, if you think about a product team, for example, they don't go out and put a product out that isn't absolutely what their customer needs and what their customer is going to get the best value from. So why would any department within a business do anything different to that? Because ultimately every department has a customer and is delivering for a customer. So if everybody within the business thinks with a product mindset, then it's always about, what does my customer need? Have I listened to what my customer needs? And have I delivered a product that my customer is going to engage with and always get the value out of, to help them to deliver the best that they can then deliver. So it's an ongoing cycle of value add.
Yeah, no. And I think the question that's popping up in my head is, how do you get, is there a balance or slash how do you get the balance between the needs of the business and the needs of the employees? How do you go about that conundrum?
Well, for me, they're not separate. I think whatever is going to add value for the business ultimately adds value to employees, because every employee wants their business to be successful. I think it's when you're thinking about the product that you're delivering, part of that is thinking about the engagement in that product. And so that's about involving your stakeholders, really understanding what they need, how they work, if they need to work differently, how you're going to support them in making that change. So it's all really about engagement at the end of the day. So delivering a product which is going to help them to add value and deliver value, but equally, how do you get that buy-in and enable that engagement to be optimized in terms of the product that you're providing? So it's thinking that stakeholder involvement is really critical.
And my guess would be that if you've got that type of dynamic, as in the HR function is supporting everybody, the whole business, because they've got a sort of collective mindset, I think I heard you say, that's got to make for a really good culture, because everybody's in it to make the business as successful as possible, rather than having sort of silos of there's the business, which is the leadership team, and then there's the employees, which are just commodities of the business. So that's a big shift for a lot of places as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the role of HR is to enable a business to perform, deliver, act as, feel like one team. That has that alignment and that, and you're putting in place a product which enables that to happen and enables that culture to develop.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Well, by nature of what I do, I think culture is king. If you've got the right culture, then it will support the strategy. The business will be able to perform at its highest level, whatever level that is. But so often I come across businesses myself who's, they put far more focus on the plan and the strategy and a lot less focus on the culture of the business, as in, have they got engaged employees? And then they ask themselves the question about why can't they get traction? Why aren't the employees doing what they're told? Even in the language, it just feels wrong. So it's great to hear of HR making that shift in to enable and support and encourage the culture as well as the people to all to do the best. Fab, that sounds really good. So I really appreciate that you can't talk about where you work at the moment, Alamy, because I just don't think that would be right. But thinking about high impact HR in these times that we've got, in these unpredictable times, what sort of things do you think that people should be focusing on when they're talking about how can they support the people within the organization? Because there's a lot of tough decisions being made at this moment. And also thinking about, what should the HR function be doing to support the business as we go through this current moment?
So I think I probably just alluded to it in what I've just said, but I think on a basic level at this time, we need to be thinking about, what HR product does the business need, the leaders need, and the wider employee population need now to enable them to deliver their roles effectively and efficiently. And at the same time, ensuring that we're sort of supporting the well-being of the employees and the business. And I think for me, it's always about keeping it simple, particularly in times of change, and particularly at the moment, there's lots of change happening. Keeping it simple is really important. And that doesn't mean only doing one thing necessarily. It means that whatever you're doing, thinking about how can you do it in the simplest way possible, so that people have less to think about and they're really focusing on what's important.
No, that makes sense, because I think that consistency and I suppose within that simplicity is a really clear message to the employee base about, I suppose, a combination of what they should be doing, how they should be taking care of themselves, but also where the business is at, and trying to be, I suppose, as transparent as possible in terms of, how are we doing? This is the impact. Because thinking about what you said before, if the mindset of the culture is, we are one, that it's very important probably to try and maintain that, even though there are bigger decisions being made by a smaller group, which will impact a much wider group.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, certainly having spoken to a number of colleagues or people in the wider sort of HR community, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is just the sheer amount of change in such a small amount of time that's happened. And, you know, when any business goes through a change, that can be challenging for people. But when you've got change, that's big change in a very short amount of time, and it's consistent change, as in, you know, when you look at some of the things that the government have put in place, there might be changes or updates every day in that. And that's a lot of change for people to take on board. So I think it's adjusting to that new normal is challenging for people. And what's really important, I think, coming out of that is that business leaders or HR, people who's within the business, are enabling a focus to remain within the business, or bringing that focus. If you feel that you've lost that focus within the business over the last few weeks, just because you're trying to take on board all that change and adapt to it, bringing that focus back into the business, that everybody, that one team, can connect back into that sense of purpose.
I think, yeah, if the focus is the anchoring point, you know, mindful that, you know, people are now working from home, which they might not have done before. They're probably trying to do support their children with their maths homework, which is always a delight if I think back of my past, and then connect back into the business. So how are you getting that focus? How are you keeping people to be connected whilst they're dealing with, you know, personal change and family change and probably concerns about some of their loved ones as well? What would be your advice for people? How should they be doing that?
So I think there's a few different things. The first one is try and keep to what was normal for you as a business in terms of your communication lines, how you previously may have set objectives or driven that focus and what have you. Try and keep that as much as possible, albeit now having to do that remotely and having to adapt to that. So I think if you've already got those things in place, make sure they're still happening. If you maybe didn't have those things in place, then think about how can I put that in place as quickly and simply as I can to enable that focus to be created. I think alongside that, as well as creating that focus and trying to follow the normal path that you would be following as a business, is also then being empathetic towards the employees within the organisation and being flexible within that. So for example, you know, if you're going to have a leadership presentation and it's going to be at 9:30 in the morning, then record that presentation, because actually if you're at home and you've got children as well, you may not be working your normal day, but you still want to be able to connect into that messaging. So it means if you've recorded the presentation, then people can actually watch that at any point in the day, and send their questions in afterwards to be answered in accordance with what they need as individuals. So you're delivering your message as a business, so you're achieving what it is you're trying to achieve, but you're being empathetic to the fact that flexibility is currently needed. You know, I think that reinforces everything I've read and seen in terms of whilst everything around you is changing, to have your stability is created by the routine. And you haven't got one to create one, and therefore I would guess, and when I listen to what you've said, I fully agree, which is that rigor, that cadence of the business in terms of, right, okay, this is how we do our meetings, etc. Whilst those might have changed and maybe not as long, keeping that routine is really important. And I think the other bit I'm really hearing you is showing how much you care about employees, recognizing that everybody's needing to adapt, you know, from childcare or whatever the challenges that we're all now facing. How important. And I think you're also talking about that purpose and getting that alignment from on objectives and delivery. How would you advise people carry on maintaining that? You know, because the business is still trying to run. How are you getting those messages out there? For me, I think it goes back to what I believe is truly the best way to sort of communicate and create focus within the business, which is about a continuous conversation type model. So having, you know, shorter term regular conversations, shorter term regular objectives, this is a really good time to employ that strategy, because things are changing so regularly as well. It just means that, you know, not only can you make sure that you're having a regular conversation to make sure that that focus and alignment remains in place, but equally it gives you an opportunity to have regular check-ins with your teams, checking on their well-being, checking on, do they understand what their role is in contributing towards the company goal at this time? You know, what support do they need to help them to achieve that? How are they doing at the moment? And actually, what do they need from a personal perspective as well? So it's not just about creating that focus and alignment and regular check-in from a business perspective, it's also thinking about that personal element, and you know, you as a line manager and with your team member, making sure you've got that regular opportunity for connecting.
No,
and ideally connecting on video if you can. I think lots of companies now are using lots of technology, and sometimes when you've got a lot of people on a call, it's difficult to have everybody on video. But I think particularly when you're doing one-to-ones, or when you're maybe doing a team meeting, having video on is really good, because it creates that more personal connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, at TheZone, we're very much about bringing, you know, the human aspect back into the workplace. And I've seen some fab things where people have, you know, done these video calls with, you know, with good humor, but, you know, all dressed up, or fancy dress, or bring your pet, or, you know, bring your toddler, and, you know, like almost embracing the challenges. So making it not a problem, just bring along what you want. And that, I think, it just lifts the tone and lifts the energy for everybody.
It does. And I think as a line manager, for example, there are different things that you can do. Now, part of this might be, you know, in order to create the focus, could be around, right, okay, I'm going to make sure that we're setting quarterly objectives. You know, those quarterly objectives obviously are aligned to the business goals. So you may have your leadership team may have gone out with a presentation. The leadership, the people leaders from the business are then setting objectives accordingly with their teams, in discussion with their teams around that, so people know how they're contributing individually into those, delivering those goals. And that's a particular type of conversation which is more like a check-in. So objective setting, how's it going, how are you delivering, what support do you need? But alongside that normal typical business meeting you might have, there's also things like virtual coffee times that you can have for your team meetings. I saw a great one the other day that somebody in the business did, which was around guess what's in everyone's fridge. They did it like a Zoom call, and it was just a team building event effectively that they did, and but it was just really great fun. And I think so I think, as well as creating that focus and alignment with the business so that everybody can link into that, and I think that does support well-being, because it helps to bring a routine, or, you know, it's part of that routine that you're bringing to people's working lives. But alongside that, I think trying, and as part of that communication methodology that you're employing, try and think about, be a bit creative and add a bit of fun into there as well. And think about how you're supporting your team spirit.
Nice. Well, I think, you know, fun and laughter is probably the best medicine for, you know, quite an intense period of time where people have got worries and concerns and whatever. So yeah, I'd not heard of that, but I'll definitely be sharing that with some other groups in terms of what's in your fridge. And the first thing I'll be doing is checking what's in mine before I open it up and show anybody else.
That would be that would be the first thing that I would do as well.
Absolutely. So you know, just whilst you were chatting, one thought, which is, there's an assumption that everybody's in a really good place, as in, you know, wanting to make things work, and all the things I've heard you talk about from a general advice point of view, in terms of, you know, the role of HR and supporting people, and that care and empathy that you talked about. But there's probably still going to be some employees out there that just aren't, they were probably difficult before, and this probably gives them a great opportunity to be even more difficult. You know, any sort of broad advice in terms of how to manage that tricky employee who's just not engaging? You know, they're still at work, but they're remote working. You know, they're being hard to manage. Any advice for any line managers out there thinking, and crikey, what do I do, and what should I be doing, and what can I do?
I think the first thing is to recognise that everybody in this situation, I think, is getting through it in the best way that they know how, and that everyone's an individual, and that probably will look very different across the whole of your team. You know, everybody in your team probably will be approaching it in a slightly different way, because that's what works for them at this time. I think your role as a line manager is to really understand the individuals within your team, and understand the personality that they operate to. And I think that's the first thing. If you can recognize that, then that starts to it gives you a starting point for how do I engage with that person. And I think I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've heard across various conversations I've had around, outside of where I currently work, it's the wider HR community, is about managing tricky situations when you're working in a remote world for the first time. My advice would be follow the same process, the same types of conversations that you would have had in situ. Go back to what you know as a line manager. So how do you lead your team normally? How do you manage difficult situations normally if you were in the normal office environment? So go back to what you know. I don't think this is necessarily the time to be learning loads of new different techniques to be using. You want to keep to what you know as much as possible. And I think ultimately it's about keeping that dialogue open. So, talking about with that individual, how are you finding things at the moment? What's working for you? What's not working for you? How can I support you? Trying to really get to know them in this moment, and then making sure you're really clear about what the expectations are, from you as a line manager and as a people leader. So setting those expectations really, really clearly, explaining why those expectations are in place, and asking them, is there any reason why they can't deliver to that expectation? Because you're here to support them. And if there is a reason that it's difficult for them, you need to know and you can help them with that. So I think for me, that would be the starting point. But that is the type of approach I would take anyway in a normal office environment world. So I think stick with what you know, make sure you're clear that you're there to support them, but also that you're really clear what your expectations are and that you expect them to deliver to that, unless they can tell you, why that's not possible for them. And you want them to explain that to you so you can then support them back again. So I think that for me would be the starting point of how you would approach that. I do think I would go back to, again, that if you're having those conversations, having the video on is really, really important if you can possibly manage it, because I think, again, you get that more personal connection. If somebody is reluctant to do that, then I think that is another conversation that needs to be had. But I don't see a reason why in business we can't be saying, actually, as part of our communication strategy, we do require the video to be on.
Yeah. So I mean, some great counsel there. And I think what I was hearing is a real level of consistency. It's almost that care, seek first to understand mindset, keep it consistent with what you would have done before the world all shifted, and so try to support more rather than go in heavier. So a real consistency with what you were saying about how to treat everybody else, which is that the routine and empathy and focus. So
yeah, and I think clarity, it is important to be caring and supportive and empathetic in this environment, but it's equally important as a people leader to be really clear about what those expectations are, and that is what somebody is being managed against, for want of a better way to put it. And I think people in this environment need to really understand that, so they know what they're delivering to. That clarity is the starting point of everything. And so it is, and it's not about being caring to the point that you're not doing anything, you're not taking anything forward, because remember, you've got a whole team to look after. It's not just about individuals, it's about looking after the welfare and the well-being of the whole team and helping the whole team to deliver. And sometimes that involves having difficult conversations with individuals, but I would say at this time that having more empathy is important, and factoring that in more heavily.
Yeah. Some great advice. Thank you, Hannah, for that. Okay, right. Let's shift tack a little bit. I don't know if you've listened to any of the previous webinars that I've been doing, but I've got a round now that I've been calling the lightning round. So through this process, we're going to sort of find out a bit more about you. So a couple of quick fire questions. So what's been your sort of favorite leadership book that you've read or listened to, I suppose I should say?
I don't typically tend to necessarily read whole books. I am very fond of webinars and connecting in with leaders, I suppose, really, who I see as being brilliant leaders in their field. So whether that's podcasts or webinars and things like that, then that tends to be more the road that I go down. I think there is, for me, the one standout person I think that I always revert back to is Brené Brown. And she talks a lot about, as leaders and within business, about vulnerability and being vulnerable yourself and demonstrating vulnerability to be a great leader, but also enabling vulnerability within your teams. And she's talking about, vulnerability in the fact that it's okay to fail because you learn from failing, and supporting an environment really, and leading and walking the walk rather than just talking the talk of how do you enable a business to show that vulnerability, to learn fast, improve fast, but fail fast, and learn again from that, and seeing that as a strength rather than as a weakness. And that's obviously lends itself very well to the sort of agile world as well. And so for me, I think she's very inspiring as a speaker and as a leader, and she's got many years of experience in working in this world, and so she, she has a great experience to fall back on, I suppose, really. So for me, I think it would be Brené Brown. And the other thing I love about Brené Brown as well, she talks, and for me, this actually resonated really strongly with me. We talk a lot about, walking the walk and talking the talk, but she talks about stepping into the arena and being prepared to step into that arena of vulnerability and putting yourself out there, moving out of your comfort zone. And I love the fact when she talks about, if you're not prepared to step into the arena yourself, don't judge people who have stepped into the arena, because you have to be in the arena to be an equal player in that field. And yeah, I think if I had to say to anybody to watch or read one person, it would be Brené Brown.
I like that. I like that whole concept of, unless you've stepped into the arena or whatever context is talking about, then you haven't got the right to criticize others. I think that's really powerful. There's so many people who criticize, but they've got no real platform to speak from.
Yeah, and she has got a book called The Call to Courage, but she's also has there's a program on Netflix, and she's done 2 brilliant TED Talks as well, that I would definitely recommend that people would go and watch.
Well, I've definitely made a note, and I'll be checking those out. What do you do to relax, Hannah? What's when you've got some time back? What do you do?
Mostly spend time with my family. I think for me, that is my ultimate relaxation, just being with my husband and my children and just chilling out together. If we were able to sort of travel or go on holiday, then it would be definitely spending time on a beach, watching the kids surfing and just chilling out in that kind of coastal environment. But for me, mostly, especially at the moment, just having that quality time with my family is really important to me.
That sounds really nice. Yeah, no, and I can imagine it's probably like a lot of people, you've been creating your to-do list of what you're going to do when the world starts to shift again. And it sounds like you guys with a load of wetsuits will be heading off to a cove somewhere down on the south coast.
Yeah, and I think it's about, for me, one of the things I've sort of thought about is just being more adventurous actually in travel, and making sure that we can continue to build those really special memories as a family. So yeah, that for me, I think, is what I want to focus on going forward.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, which is when we've all been sort of confined, it makes you really think about what's important to us. And it's probably less the material things that, I know I've been focused on in the past, and it's more the connection thing. So great talk. Okay. So look, just pulling it all together, any sort of key takeaways for people? If you had one or two, hey, look, here's one or two things that I would say really give some focus to that, what would they be?
I think for me, it's 2 things, or it falls under sort of 2 headings. One is about ensuring that you are enabling or creating that focus, alignment and sense of purpose in your organization at this time, whether that's about making sure that everyone's reconnected with the focus and purpose that was already there, or whether that's actually you haven't had that before, but this is the time to start doing it. Thinking about how you can do that as simply as possible, and bringing that one team together. And the simplest way, in my view, to do that is to as a leadership team, go out there, talk about what the goal you're really focusing on, what's your vision, and then setting some really quick and simple objectives within teams to help them to align to that. And the second one would be around just a real commitment to good quality communication across the whole organisation. Now, whether that is you're doing a leadership update every other week to the business, you're having those regular check-ins, you know, you're doing fun stuff in it from a team perspective, but making sure you've got that really consistent message going out across the business in all parts of the business. But equally important as communicating out, it's really listening in. So going out to the wider employee population to say, you know, what do you want to know about at this time? What do you need to know about at this time? Are we sharing what you want to or need to hear? You know, is it giving you that clarity that you're seeking? So making sure you're getting that feedback, maybe before you start, but equally as you're going through that commitment to communication, to make sure that whatever time you're spending on communicating is absolutely delivering the most value that it can.
Nice and clear. Thank you. So I think we're going to have to wrap up, I'm afraid, but you know, I want to thank everybody for listening to the webinar. I know we weren't able to do it live, but I do feel that there's been some tremendous wisdom and some experience being shared today. So thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, then through the LinkedIn post, etc., or on the YouTube piece, post them up, and I'm sure between Hannah and I will do our best to come back to you. So that just leaves me to say a real heartfelt thank you to Hannah for stepping into the arena today, for sharing your time for free, and to try and contribute to what we've been trying to achieve, is contributing to everybody as we go through these difficult times. So enjoy the rest of Thursday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laurent.
Thank you, Hannah. Bye.